Not every betrayal starts with hate. Some begin with opportunity. The small town of Darby Creek hadn't changed much in the 20 years since Mason Fletcher left it behind. Same dusty gas station with flickering neon, same brick courthouse on Main Street, and the same water tower with the peeling white paint. But Mason had changed. He pulled up in his rental, a sleek black Cadillac that looked wildly out of place next to the muddy pickup trucks and rust-bitten sedans, and parked across from what used to be Eddie's Diner. Now it was the Copper Spoon, a desperate attempt at gentrification with copper chairs and overpriced coffee. He stepped out, adjusted his jacket, and hesitated before walking in. Mason wasn't back for nostalgia. He was back because of one man, Travis Keene. Travis had been his best friend since second grade. They'd grown up 2 doors apart, spent summers fishing the creek, shared one broken bike between them, and even took the fall together when Mason broke Coach Larrabee's office window. Travis had always been loyal to a fault, the kind of friend who would lend you his last $20 and never ask for it back. And Mason had once been the kind of guy who didn't forget a debt like that. But time had done what time does, it pulled them apart. Mason chased opportunity, clawing his way into the world of real estate, learning fast and cutting corners faster. Travis stayed in Darby Creek, running the same construction company his dad left behind, content with honest work and small-town life. It was because of that company that Mason was back now. Inside the Copper Spoon, Mason spotted him instantly. Travis hadn't changed much, broad-shouldered, sun-weathered face, flannel shirt tucked into worn jeans. He looked up, and his eyes crinkled with the kind of smile that said nothing had ever gone wrong between them. "Mason Fletcher," Travis said, rising to his feet. "Look what the wind dragged back." They hugged. It was real. It was warm. But Mason felt a cold knot in his gut. "You look good, man," Travis said, motioning for him to sit. "What's it been, 10 years? Longer. Since your wedding, I think." Mason forced a smile. "How's Lori?" "Gone. Took off 2 years ago. Said she wanted the city life. I stayed. Never could stand all that noise." There was no bitterness in Travis's voice. Just a quiet acceptance Mason both admired and pitied. They caught up, talked about high school, about Travis's 2 kids, about the factory that had shut down last year. Mason danced around the real reason he was here, but eventually, he leaned forward. "I've got a proposal for you," he said. "Big money." Travis raised an eyebrow. "Go on." Mason laid it out carefully. There was a company, Horizon East, looking to develop a massive commercial property on the edge of Darby Creek. But the land was messy. Zoned for agriculture, tied up in local ordinances. The town council wouldn't budge. "Unless they're looking for someone local," Mason said. "Someone with influence, credibility. You have that, Travis." Travis frowned. "You want me to sell out my town?" "No," Mason said quickly. "I want you to help it grow. They'll bring in jobs, tax revenue. And wipe out 3 family farms. Put a strip mall over Jenkins Hill." Travis shook his head. "You know I can't be a part of that." Mason leaned back, exhaling slowly. "They're offering $5 million. You'd get it clean. No one would ever know you were involved." Travis stared at him. "That's blood money. It's opportunity. I've got 2 boys. What kind of man would I be if I taught them you can put a price on loyalty?" Mason looked away. He felt the old shame crawl back, the kind he'd buried under contracts and condos. He should have left it there. But he didn't. "There's another way," Mason said carefully. "You don't have to say yes. Just delay the permits. Quietly. Block the farmers' appeal. They're barely hanging on anyway." Travis's face changed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't stand. But something hardened in him. "I thought you came back because you missed home," he said quietly. "Because you missed me." "I did," Mason said. "I do." Travis pushed his coffee aside. "Then you should know, I'd rather be broke with my integrity than rich with a knife in a friend's back." Mason opened his mouth, but Travis stood. "I'm sorry, Mason. But I think you should go." And just like that, the man Mason once called a brother walked out. But as Mason sat alone in that overpriced diner, watching the rain blur the windows, his phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. He'll change his mind. Everyone does. Let's talk. Mason stared at it, heart pounding. The door had just closed behind his friend. And another one had just opened, darker, but promising everything he ever wanted. The rain had settled into a steady whisper by the time Mason drove out to the edge of town. The message had included an address, an old farmhouse off Route 14 that looked like it hadn't seen fresh paint since the Reagan administration. As he pulled into the gravel drive, headlights lit up a sagging porch and a figure waiting in the shadows. He half expected something shady, some slick real estate exec in a tailored suit with a cigarette and fake smile. But instead, it was a woman. She stepped into the light. Early 40s. Sharp jawline, wind-blown hair pulled into a loose bun, and eyes that didn't blink enough. She wore boots caked in mud and a dark wool coat. No introductions. No handshake. "You're late," she said. Mason raised an eyebrow. Wasn't aware this was a timed meeting. She turned without answering and walked inside. He followed. The interior of the farmhouse was stripped down, no decor, no warmth. Just a card table, 2 chairs, and a stack of folders that looked like they'd been handled too many times. She gestured for him to sit. "I'm Beth Lathrop. Horizon East's fixer," she said. "We don't do PR. We don't smile for photos. We solve problems." Mason leaned forward. "Travis won't do it." Beth nodded like she already knew. "He's a decent man. Stubborn. Loyal. That makes him vulnerable." He frowned. "He's not corrupt." "No," she agreed. "But he's predictable. He'll do anything to protect what he loves. Including compromise." She slid a folder toward him. Inside were photos, Travis's construction equipment. Receipts. A citation from the State Safety Board. A foreclosure notice on a property he was renovating. "He's stretched too thin," Beth said. "He's behind on 3 loans. His excavator hasn't passed inspection in 2 years. His license is close to suspension." Mason's stomach turned. "You've been spying on him." Beth smirked. "We do our homework. You said he was your best friend. You know how to push him. Use that." Mason looked at the documents again. Travis had never asked for help. Not once. Even when Mason made his first million and sent him a check, Travis mailed it back with nothing but a handwritten note, "We grew up the same way. That makes us even." "I'm not blackmailing him," Mason said flatly. "You're not," Beth replied. "You're giving him a way out. $5 million. Half up front. He signs the delay order, keeps his company afloat, and no one suffers. The farms get bought eventually. He just helps us get there faster. And if he still says no." Beth's voice didn't change. "Then we go around him. Hit the county board. Buy off the new guy, Monroe. He's greener, easier. But that'll leave your name off the contract. No commission. No payout. Your call." Mason stood, folder still in hand. "I'll think about it." Beth didn't try to stop him. "Tick-tock," she said as he left. That night, Mason couldn't sleep. The rain had stopped, but the town was thick with silence. He sat by the motel window, looking out at the familiar streets. There was a time when he believed in things, in loyalty, in roots, in right and wrong. But that version of him was buried under deals and deadlines and empty toasts at investor galas. He thought of Travis's boys. Of the pride in Travis's voice when he talked about building them a treehouse last summer. How he worked sunup to sundown and still made it to every little league game. Mason had money. He had the penthouse view, the tailored suits, the number on the Forbes list. But no one ever built a treehouse for him. And he sure as hell had never built one for anyone else. He picked up his phone, stared at the screen. One number. One call. He could talk to Travis, explain everything. Offer to cover the debt, no strings attached. But instead, his finger hovered, and tapped Beth's number. The next morning, Travis was loading drywall into the back of his truck when Mason pulled up. No Cadillac this time. He'd switched to an old Ford he'd rented from a neighbor to blend in. Travis wiped his hands and nodded. Didn't think I'd see you again. I shouldn't be here, Mason said. But I couldn't leave it like that. Travis leaned against the tailgate, squinting at him. You still trying to sell the deal? No, Mason hesitated. Then, I'm trying to save you. And with that, he handed over the folder. Travis flipped through the pages, the debts, the citations, the warnings. His face hardened. Where the hell did you get this? Horizon East has people. They're watching you. They know you're vulnerable. You brought this to scare me. To warn you. Travis stared at him. What's your cut? 2.5. The number hung in the air like a sin. I can make this right, Mason said. You sign. You save your company. Your boys keep their house. And I make sure your name stays clean. Travis stepped forward slowly, eyes burning. You came back to offer me a lifeline, he said. And you're the one who tied the damn noose. Mason said nothing. And then Travis did something Mason didn't expect. He didn't punch him. He didn't scream. He just shook his head and walked away. Don't come back here, he said without turning. Not unless you remember who you used to be. Mason didn't leave town. He told himself it was because he still had unfinished business, but deep down, he knew that wasn't the truth. He stayed because something in Travis's words had stuck like a thorn under his skin, not painful enough to cripple him, but impossible to ignore. He spent the next few days drifting through Darby Creek like a ghost from his own past. Every corner held echoes. The parking lot behind the high school where he and Travis had once lit firecrackers and nearly set the dumpster ablaze. The rusted basketball hoop in the park where they used to bet lunch money on free throws. Even the old rec center, now boarded up and overgrown. Time hadn't just passed. It had moved on without him. On the fourth night, he found himself outside the fence of Travis's backyard. The house was lit up inside. Laughter spilled from the open kitchen window. His boys, Sam and Eli, were chasing each other through the grass with Nerf guns while Travis grilled on the deck, beer in hand, same as he used to when they were kids. Mason watched from the shadows, unseen, uninvited. And for the first time in years, he felt poor. Not for lack of money, he had more than he could spend in a dozen lifetimes. But for the absence of something else. Something deeper. Something he hadn't realized he'd been starving for. Connection. Belonging. A life that wasn't transactional. He stayed until the laughter faded and the lights inside went dark. Then he drove. Not back to the motel. Back to the farmhouse on Route 14. Beth was waiting again. She always was. You've got news, she said without looking up. I'm out. She looked up then. Come again. I'm out, Mason repeated. No deal. Not through Travis. Not through Monroe. Not through anyone. Beth stood slowly, like a cat deciding whether to strike. You realize how much you're walking away from. I do. You'll never get another offer like this. I don't want one. Beth folded her arms. You think this makes you noble? No, Mason said. It makes me human. There was a long pause. Then Beth's expression changed, no longer sharp, but clinical. Cold. You're off the project, she said. Your name gets scratched, and any future you had with Horizon East disappears. You'll be radioactive in every room we touch. I'll take my chances, Mason said. As he turned to leave, she said one last thing, not a threat, but something worse. You're not a hero, Mason. You're just a man who blinked. He didn't answer. The next morning, Mason checked out of the motel and was halfway out of town when he saw the orange flames. Smoke curled up behind the trees near Route 6, where Travis's storage lot was. Mason's heart dropped. He turned the wheel hard and gunned it toward the smoke. By the time he got there, the fire trucks were already spraying water. 2 of Travis's trailers had gone up. Equipment burned. Blackened tires smoldered on the gravel. Travis stood near the fence, face pale, hands clenched. Mason got out and walked toward him. I swear to God, I didn't, he started. Travis didn't look at him. I know. Mason blinked. You do? Yeah, Travis said. Because you stayed. And that's not something the old you would have done. Mason didn't know what to say. The sheriff came over. Looks like arson, he said. Deliberate. Someone poured accelerant in 3 spots. Travis exhaled hard, jaw tightening. Beth. Mason's chest twisted. They're sending a message. I got it loud and clear, Travis muttered. This town's not theirs. Not for sale. Mason looked at him. Let me help. Travis turned. With what? Insurance is not gonna cover half of this. I've got contracts I can't fill now. You think I want charity from the guy who brought this here? I didn't know they'd go this far. But you brought them to my door. Mason felt it, the weight of it. The guilt. The chain of consequences. You still think you can walk away from this clean? Travis asked. No, Mason said. But maybe I can help you rebuild. No deals. No tricks. Just help. Travis stared at him a long time. Then he walked away without answering. That night, Mason sat in his car outside the burned lot until morning. Watching the embers fade. Wondering if this was what redemption felt like, heavy, painful, and without applause. He didn't know if Travis would ever forgive him. But for the first time, he wasn't trying to buy his way back in. He was ready to earn it. 3 days after the fire, Mason showed up at Travis's site in work boots and a flannel shirt that still had a price tag on it. Travis spotted him from across the lot, standing next to a scorched trailer with a clipboard in hand. For a long second, they just looked at each other, 2 men with history between them, and no easy way forward. You lose a bet. Travis called out. Mason cracked a half smile. I figured I'd try manual labor. Apparently, it's good for the soul. Travis sighed. You know you don't have to do this. I know, Mason said. But I should. Travis didn't say yes. But he didn't say no either. By noon, Mason was hauling debris with a local kid named Jonah who had the shoulders of a linebacker and the mouth of a stand-up comic. The work was brutal, hot sun, sharp metal, everything reeking of ash, but Mason didn't complain. He worked until his back ached and his hands blistered, and still he showed up again the next day. And the day after that. Little by little, the lot began to take shape again. Travis ordered new parts. Mason helped negotiate discounts. Jonah's cousin volunteered his forklift. Word got around, and soon the town that had once looked at Mason with suspicion began to nod his way at gas stations and diners. But not everyone was forgiving. One night, as Mason walked out of the hardware store with a box of gloves, a man stepped out from behind a pickup. Older. Stubble-faced. Wore an old farm jacket and a hat with a faded tractor logo. You Mason Fletcher? He asked. Mason slowed. Yeah. The men stepped closer. I know who you are. You're the guy who tried to sell us out. I didn't. Don't care. I saw Travis's rig on fire. Saw him hauling charred equipment like a dog. That's on you. Mason said nothing. You think just 'cause you're out here sweating like the rest of us, we'll forget? No, Mason said quietly. I don't expect that. Good. Because this town remembers. And some of us don't give second chances. He walked away, spitting on the gravel as he passed. Mason stood there, gloves in hand, throat tight. He couldn't blame the men. He had his facts. He had his pain. Still, it stung. The next morning, Mason showed up earlier than usual. Travis was already there, running through estimates. You gonna let me help you rebuild this company? Mason asked. Travis looked up. What do you mean? I want to invest. Quietly. No headlines. No strings. Travis shook his head. You already gave your sweat. And I'll keep doing that. But let me do more. I don't want your guilt money, Mason. It's not guilt. It's gratitude. For not shutting the door on me. For letting me show up. Travis stared at him. Why now? Mason hesitated. Then, because I spent 20 years chasing something I thought would make me feel like I mattered. And the closest I've felt to it is right here, digging holes and fixing what I helped break. Travis exhaled. You really want to get your hands dirty? I really do. You ever poured concrete? Only metaphorically. Travis chuckled, a real laugh. The first since the fire. All right, he said. You're buying breakfast. And I don't eat anywhere with the word bistro in it. That afternoon, Mason sat with Travis in a folding chair overlooking the lot. It was still half ruined, but there was movement, hope. Trucks pulled in. Materials stacked up. The future was under construction. You remember that summer we built a ramp out of plywood and almost broke both our necks? Travis asked. Mason laughed. You mean the one where you got a concussion and I swore we were going to start a skate team? Yeah. I remember you yelling, "This is how we get sponsors," while I bled on the sidewalk. They both laughed. And for a moment, they weren't men with debts and regrets, just kids again, dreaming on a cracked driveway. You were always chasing something, Travis said, softer now. Even back then. I used to think you'd either make it big or blow yourself up trying. Maybe I did both, Mason said. Travis didn't answer. He just looked out at the sight, then down at his hands. You really think people can change? He asked. Mason didn't blink. Only if they're willing to stay when it's hard. Travis nodded slowly. And for the first time, he didn't look like a man protecting his boundaries. He looked like someone letting the past breathe. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm Mason hadn't known he'd missed. Early mornings. Strong coffee in paper cups. The sound of hammers and generators filling the air instead of email alerts and boardroom jargon. He learned to lay drywall without splitting it, how to drive a skid steer without tipping it over, and how to stand still long enough to listen, not just to orders or deadlines, but to people. One afternoon, Travis invited him to dinner. A real dinner. Inside the house. It wasn't fancy, just chili in mismatched bowls and cornbread slightly burnt at the edges. But to Mason, it felt like a feast. Sam and Eli were louder than necessary, and the dog kept stealing napkins, but no one cared. Halfway through the meal, Sam leaned over and whispered to Mason, "Are you really rich?" Mason chuckled. "Used to be." "What happened?" He paused. I remembered what being poor taught me. That not everything valuable has a price tag. Sam didn't quite get it. But Travis did. Their eyes met across the table, no more tension, just the quiet acknowledgement of a truth earned through pain. Later, after the kids were asleep, Mason stood on the porch with Travis, watching fireflies blink in the tall grass. "You know they're not done," Travis said. "Beth. Horizon East. They don't lose easy." Mason nodded. "Let them come. We're not the same people they threatened last time. I'm still broke. But now you're not alone." That night, Mason couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt or anxiety, but because of clarity. He'd spent his whole adult life trying to climb out of the dirt he was born in, trying to prove he didn't belong to it. And now, after all that effort, he was back in it. Hands dirty, boots worn, and finally, at peace. But peace wasn't going to last. It started with a visit to the bank. Travis's line of credit, the one that was supposed to get extended for the rebuild, was suddenly revoked. No reason given. No appeal granted. The next day, the permit office flagged his application for a small utility shed. Then the supplier in Huntsville called and canceled the steel order. Something about unresolved legal questions. Mason made some calls. He didn't need confirmation. He already knew. Beth was tightening the noose. He drove 2 hours to Horizon East's regional office, a sterile glass building surrounded by nothing but manicured grass and cameras. They didn't let him in. Wouldn't even take his name. "She's not here," the receptionist said. "And she doesn't take walk-ins." "She knows who I am," Mason said. "She said you'd come," the woman replied calmly. "She also said you'd leave empty-handed." Back in the parking lot, Mason leaned on his car and stared at the sky. He thought about going to the press. Making noise. But Horizon East had lawyers, PR muscle, politicians. They'd bury the truth before the ink dried. He didn't need noise. He needed leverage. That night, Mason went to the one place he'd avoided, his storage unit in Nashville. Inside was everything he didn't want to carry: old ledgers, burner phones, contracts he'd once sworn were standard practice. Evidence of deals not quite illegal, but definitely immoral. He wasn't proud of what he had. But buried in that pile were names. And Horizon East was one of them. A long time ago, they'd paid him to grease the wheels on a condo complex in Atlanta, through back channels, through shell companies. And Mason had kept the receipts. Not because he thought he'd ever need them, but because part of him never trusted people like Beth. Now those receipts had a purpose. He returned to Darby Creek and called a man he hadn't spoken to in 8 years, Marshall Denton, an investigative journalist with a habit of showing up where the money stank. "You said if I ever had something real," Mason told him, "you'd listen. You finally ready to turn on the people who made you rich?" Denton asked. "I'm ready to burn the bridge I never should have built." The article hit 3 days later. Front page of a national business outlet. Real estate giant caught in zoning corruption scandal, whistleblower speaks out. Beth's name wasn't in the headline. But it didn't have to be. The paper trail spoke loud enough. Horizon East issued a vague denial. Unfounded claims. Fabricated documents. The usual script. But the markets noticed. Shares dipped. A city council member in Atlanta stepped down. The story kept growing. And Darby Creek. The bank called Travis back. Credit line restored. The permit office fast-tracked his shed request. And the steel from Huntsville. Delivered with a discount and a handwritten note, "Sorry for the mix-up." Travis showed up at Mason's motel with a 6-pack and 2 folding chairs. They sat in the parking lot, under flickering streetlights, watching trucks pass on the highway. "You really lit the fuse," Travis said. "Thought it was time." "You torched your future." Mason nodded. "Yeah. But I might have earned a better one." Months passed. Darby Creek's skyline didn't change, still no towers, no billboards, no corporate logos, but something deeper shifted. A sense of protection, of quiet resistance. The kind of pride that doesn't come from wealth, but from holding the line when no one's looking. Mason stayed. He bought a modest house near the edge of town, 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, a porch swing with chipped paint. He drove a beat-up truck. Took his coffee black. And every morning, he walked to the site Travis rebuilt from ash. They didn't talk much about what happened. They didn't need to. Real friends don't keep score, they just show up. Sam and Eli started calling him Uncle Mason, and eventually stopped asking if he'd ever be rich again. One chilly October evening, Travis handed him a thick folder. "What's this?" Mason asked. "Partnership papers. 50-50 split." Mason froze. "You serious?" "You've earned it." He took the folder slowly, heart tight. This wasn't the $1 million deal he once would have chased. It was worth more. The following spring, Horizon East quietly sold its land rights in Darby Creek. A local farming co-op bought it for half the asking price. No press release. No lawsuit. Beth disappeared from the headlines. Mason doubted she'd ever really disappear. But she wouldn't be back here. Not in his town. One afternoon, he sat on the porch with Travis, beer in hand, while the kids ran barefoot through the grass. "You ever miss it?" Travis asked. "The old life." Mason thought about glass towers, cocktail parties, and private flights. Then he looked at the boys building a treehouse in the same way he and Travis once had, with splinters, crooked nails, and dreams that didn't need funding. "No," Mason said. "I don't." He'd lost millions. He'd burned bridges. But in the ruins, he'd found something priceless. A friend. A future. And the men he'd almost forgotten how to be.